Hey there, welcome into another edition of Making the Leap. This is like our Christmas here at the Herzog Foundation. It's our Teacher of the Year Awards, and this is our third year for it. And we're going to be making our way to Washington, D.C., the Museum of the Bible, to honor great teachers, 13 of them from around the country. This is a process that every year we take submissions till a certain period on the calendar, and then we pour over thousands and thousands of submissions, and we select 13. And over the series of the next 3 shows, you're going to meet these 13 spectacular teachers.
And they have some incredible backgrounds, and I cannot wait to share who they are, where they're from, their stories. We get to hear some pretty unique testimony as well, just from people of how they became what they are, becoming teachers and what they're doing for kids.
And I would always encourage you, if one, you are thinking about making the leap, you're thinking about taking your kids and moving them into a Christian education, I think these teachers are going to go a long way into making that final push in your heart. And if you are a teacher who listens to this show and you're thinking, I really don't want to continue teaching in public school, but I've still got it on my heart to teach, you're going to hear from a lot of teachers who share that experience too. So I hope these people are as inspirational to you as they have been to us.
Absolutely.
So enjoy this edition of our Teacher of the Year. We're going to do this in 3 parts. So hope you enjoy it. You're going to meet some great people here. We've talked with some fairly young, early, start out, brand new Christian teachers. Now we're going to go to the other end of the spectrum. A mature, well-established Christian school teacher of 45 years, John McWilliams. Congratulations on being Teacher of the Year.
Thank you for saying mature.
Yeah, that's right. Seasoned
Instead of
citizen.
seasons.
We're all about the synonyms. We're all about synonyms here.
But in all sincerity, to teach for 45 years says you love what you do.
I do.
Yeah, and you have always taught Christian education?
1 year in public school, and that was enough. And
Was that your first year? Was that when you first started, or was it
79-ish, I think?
Okay.
In a small Northwest Arkansas school.
And even back then, it was enough. 1 year was enough,
Yes, it
and off
was.
you went.
So what did you notice even back then was the difference in Arkansas? And by the way, Arkansas at that time probably not known culturally as being very, out of control, like we would consider a lot of them today.
Right. And there wouldn't have been as big a difference between public and Christian as there was now.
But you noticed it anyway. There was a difference.
Yeah, you noticed it. And at first, I naively thought when I heard of this Christian school that had just started that, that would be nice to still be able to teach biology and tack on some Christian ideas, to get them across. And then God's taught me through the years that it's just much deeper and more complex and much more effective to do Christian teaching intentionally instead of just tacking things on.
I think that's a really, really important thing for people who think, I'll just send my kids somewhere else just so they get a little dose, right? Get a little Jesus and call it a day. But it can't work that way.
It's a worldview thing, and
Absolutely.
it has to be, from the ground up to be effective. And I think that affects some Christian schools, some that are only in name that don't really try to do a worldview change that addresses all parts of a student.
Absolutely.
Which we have the freedom to do. That's one of the reasons I've stayed with Christian education, because you literally can address every aspect of a student's life as you feel led to do that.
And when you're in a science area, so you teach within sciences, that's got to be so prevalent because there's so much.
Oh, it's great. Science is a different animal because you literally, you take the Romans 1:20 idea that says you look around you, which is basically science, and you see the creation. And that points to God, to the point that Paul says you're without excuse for not knowing there's a God. And it's just great to see students suddenly, that idea hits them and they say, oh, this thing is so complicated. And what made it so complicated? And you follow their thoughts and they say, there must be something more complicated than me that started everything. And you don't even have to say anything. You just sit back and watch this process.
John, you teach what grade?
Right now I teach ninth
grade, freshman. This is something that we cover on our show as we talk about people that are considering leaving public school and jumping into Christian education. Science in particular is one of those subjects that we talk a lot about. Yeah. When you get maybe the outside secular culture that maybe thinks about coming into a Christian education for the first time, science is always one of those that gets most challenged, isn't it?
And it always will be. I think the going paradigm with evolution and everything that goes with it is going to be there, and it's something that if unless you have the guts to actually address that from the beginning and say, no, I have a different worldview, and I believe my worldview, should we say, is better than someone else's worldview.
In 45 years, have you been challenged that way? Have you had to talk with kids that want to challenge you that way on creation?
Many times.
How do you do it?
Straight back to the Bible. And Scripture clearly says certain things about a creator creating. And, there are arguments about how God did it, the length of time and things like that. But the idea that there is a creator who actually made what's out there, as Romans 1:20 says, I take that as a promise. And I don't really worry that much. I just see that if they look at the creation around them, and that's my job, to clearly show them the complexity of God's creation. And I think He will take over then and show them that, this is me that this creation is talking about. And hopefully that turns them into a seeker and someone who will pursue it further to actually find the God that we know that actually did this.
I was going to ask that, because the Herzog Foundation, as they ask for applications for this, and take nominations, they're always looking for the innovative approaches. And I would think after 45 years, you've seen approaches come and go. But what struck me when I was reading about you was the program that you had been using, where you used conservation land to help build kind of a curriculum around it, or you used it for your students. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I found that to be, that outdoor education is something that I think is so important. I think we're losing a lot of it with the advancement of technology. And so I thought, for high school ages and outside and all that, I wondered if you would share a little bit about that.
Most of my students were elementary ed students who would be teaching science, obviously, as part of their career someday.
Okay.
And I wanted something that would, again, go back to that Romans 1:20, because first of all, most students that come in as freshmen and take my courses think that they can't do science because they've already learned in high school that this is beyond me and I can't do it. And so to think that I'm going to be a science teacher someday to second or third graders, it's intimidating to them. And that was number one on my list, first of all, not to teach content to the extent that they hated science when they came out. So I thought that I succeeded if they come out of my class and says, this was pretty fun.
It must work, because you have been nominated by peers, I'm sure parents, I don't know specifically who, maybe you do, but as Teacher of the Year. That is quite an honor, because we only pick a handful of those from around the country, and you stood out. So why do you suppose that is after 45 years? You can brag on yourself a little.
I am humbled by that. I feel like Forrest Gump a lot of times. I just find myself in situations. But God is very providential, and He is led, and He's blessed. And I think to stay true to that, again, the Romans 1:20 thing says that if you look around and see it, that takes care of itself. And that's what I want my students mainly to see. And the content side of it was to be able to go to their school someday and apply what they'd learned. Most of it was so simple they could do it in their backyard. So it wasn't a really complicated nature trail or something. It was just very simple activities on a bunch of Oklahoma prairie land. And it was high interest. We tried to do things that sometimes had that gross factor, because that attracts students of all ages.
Kids love gross, yes, absolutely.
Hybrid, and I would love to ask you quickly, because we do cover different kinds of Christian education. Your school, Providence Classical Christian, is known as a hybrid classical school. And for people that aren't familiar with that, we've covered it on our show before, but could you explain what hybrid classical means to people that are maybe new to Christian education?
The hybrid part of it is that we teach Monday and Tuesday and Thursday on campus, regular classroom, and on Wednesday and Friday they have assignments that we give them and monitor them, sometimes over the computer, sometimes it's just a lesson they're working on. But the parents are able to monitor what they're doing. So it's not necessarily full homeschool, but the parents definitely, especially in high school, the parents watch their kids' work and just basically make sure it's done, help them answer questions.
How important is it, in your perspective, to have that the parental involvement versus?
Oh, it's the key factor.
And so that's what I was curious about. Like, our daughter's in a 5-day. I check the homework's done at night, but unless I dig deep, every single day to figure out what's happening? I don't know. And I would assume that that's probably one of the best benefits of a hybrid setup, is that parents
are involved. And like I said, I've seen this work out so many times, that students who had parental involvement, and that thing they say about quality time, that's not always the way it works. Quantity time also spent with kids, with parents. To me, when I look back, the students who have been the most successful and the most mature spiritually coming out are the ones who had parents that weren't perfect, but they were parents who spent time and would admit that, I don't know this and I need to find out, or I'm not perfect.
Well, John McWilliams, after 45 years of teaching, you've now won an award. You probably were doing it well before now, but we're honored to have you, and congratulations on being a Teacher of the Year.
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Lucas Vieira, who is here from Camarillo. I want to make sure I'm saying that
You're saying it right. That's
all
right.
Of it.
All of it from California, all the way here to Missouri. So glad to have you here as a recipient of the Christian Education Teacher Awards. I always love talking with people that specifically are teaching in the area of Bible, even though we're talking about Christian education.
Sure.
Because that's huge.
Yeah.
Because there's so much, as a person who's studying the Bible consistently and constantly, and knowing that there's just a lot to know. And then we sit in our Bible study every week, and I'm like, I didn't know that.
Sure.
I didn't know that. I'm like, how are we just learning this now?
Yeah, we're very late bloomers.
Yeah, today years old when I learned that, that
sure,
kind of thing.
sure.
So that's a big thing to take on, especially when we're talking about it in the context of Christian school. So what is one approach or a couple of approaches that you take to make sure you're covering not just the wide piece, but the deep piece?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. As we think about Christian education, I think one of the chief tasks of the Christian educator is to help form the soul of their student, right? Of course, we do want our students to, we want to shape the minds of our students, right? Help form the minds, but as Christians, we want to form the soul. We want to form the whole person. And so I love the Bible classroom, not only because they get to learn, the major events that we read in God's scriptures, but how then do those major events and that major storyline of the Bible, how does that affect the student, right? How does that affect my own soul? And how does that affect the way I'm supposed to live in the world, right? So my favorite moments in the classroom, as we're talking about theology or as we're talking about Bible, are those moments in which I get to kind of pause and say, now, how does this affect you? Or how does this affect how you see this certain cultural event that's going on, right? Of course, we can look at Genesis 1, and God made male and female in his image. Okay, what do you guys think about that? Okay, and what does that actually have to say to our current culture and the lies that you hear every single day on your cell phones? Right. What does this communicate? What does this bring to bear on our own moment? And so those are the moments I love, right? Because in that space, we're not only forming the mind, which of course we're forming the mind, but we're also forming the soul, right? We're giving students lasting things, eternal things.
We love to talk about kind of cultural trends and things that we pick up on our show. And California is synonymous, at least with the rest of us in the country who live in California.
Sure.
It's a massive state.
Yes.
And you certainly have pockets of crazy, you have pockets of quite normal, I understand. But California broadly, I mean, just recently, the governor there signed a piece of legislation that really drives, in my view, a wedge between parents and kids.
That's exactly it.
And probably pushing a lot of parents, I would think, from public school into a Christian
That's true.
setting.
That was my question. Do you find that you guys are growing because of the policies that are really turning quite radical there?
All of the Christian schools in my area are trying to figure out ways how we can expand because the need is growing so heavily. Like you just mentioned, just within this past week, as you said, Governor Newsom, signed that AB 1559 bill, which basically says the public school should not and cannot tell the parents of a child that their child is now identifying as a different gender or using different pronouns or identifying as transgender. And so many parents Christian parents are beginning to wake up and see this need, right? Who's going to be the parent, right? Is it going to be the parent, or is it going to be the state?
And do you find also that even people that maybe don't put a premium on their relationship with Christ. Maybe they're not churchgoers. Maybe they don't think deeply about it. Maybe they'd say, yeah, I'm a Christian if you ask them, but they don't really put a premium on it. Do you find things like this are driving people to you in that conversation?
That's exactly it. We even have families who come to us in admissions processes, right? And maybe they have been in church just a few times, or it's been a long time, but they see the current cultural parasites and evils, and they know they need to go somewhere else, and they don't know where to go, right? And so they see us, and they're saying, how can we get our students involved in that? Whatever it is, we can see that you're giving students truth, right?
And you guys are not, I mean, to be clear, it's not that you're church for families, but you do have to meet people where they are, and if they're interested, I assume there's a conversation with parents that you say, hey, I'm teaching Bible, your 8th grader may not have had much experience with it, maybe you haven't, but we're going to come along together now.
That's right. And I think, of course, it is our hope at my school that we would come alongside families of the church, right? But there are many who are seeking a safe haven for their students. And what I love that we get to do as Christian educators is we not only get to give them a safe haven, but we actually get to equip them, right? Of course, so the school should be a shelter. The Christian school should be a shelter from the lies of culture, but also it should be the equipping room where they're prepared and they're geared up to go out into culture and to be salt and light, to be faithful. So I'm grateful that we get to do that.
You have been teaching, as I read on the notes here, not terribly long, 5-6 years?
Yeah, 5 years. Yeah, that's right.
You wanted to get into Christian education immediately, or did you look at other professions?
That's a great question. Out of college, I wanted to go into Christian ministry. Okay, I wanted to go into church ministry. Okay. And just because I needed another part-time job, I stumbled into Christian education. And all of a sudden, I fell in love with it because of what I just said. I fell in love because I got to see, not only do I get to shape the mind, but I get to shape the soul. Not only do I get to provide a safe space for our precious young people, but I also get to equip them and prepare them, right? So if we want to see cultural transformation, we actually need to grab the hearts of our kids. Right? If I want to see the glory of God made known, not just inside, not just around the dinner table, not just in the worship service, but in the public sphere as well. What better way to do that than by discipling and raising up and equipping and training our students?
And what was your education when you were in school? Were you homeschooled? Were you in Christian school?
So I praise the Lord for my parents. I had the blessing of having, a K through 12, K through 20 Christian education. Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. And so, and my parents were very wise in the sense that they saw the writing on the wall in culture and how they wanted to equip me and prepare me. And so I've been in Christian education my whole life, and I love it.
How about demographics?
Yeah.
What do you see? California is a very diverse state.
Sure.
I assume you see a litany of different demographics come through your school. Is that about right?
That's absolutely right.
Do you see a growth in any particular demographic?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean...
And I know it's anecdotal to your experience.
Of course. Yeah, I think one thing that I'm starting to see more and more is, at least, especially in the classical Christian world, right? I think there are some who might think, oh, that's just for, a certain type of people. That's just for white folks or whatever it might be. But, for those who are watching right now, they can even see the color of my skin, right? The heritage of Western civilization and the glories of the Christian faith that we're seeking to pass on, it's all of ours, right? Yeah. And so I love in the classroom where we have students from all different walks of life, right? Families from all different areas and socioeconomic backgrounds. Our head of school loves to say, we want our Christian school to be for both the Mazdas and the Maseratis, right? The Mazdas and the Maseratis.
That's awesome.
And so, we want to provide that space where anybody who longs to give an education to their kid that is both a safe haven and that is also an equipping place, they can provide that for their student.
You must be doing an exemplary job to have been nominated and then selected as one of our Teachers of the Year. Congratulations to you.
I'm grateful and humbled, and I think there are plenty of people that deserve to be here, so it truly is an honor.
We will see you in Washington, D.C. soon.
I'm looking forward to it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Julie Pickard, welcome in. Welcome
Thank
to Making the
you.
Leap. We're glad to have you here. It's been so fun getting to meet people and talk with them about where they've been and what they're up to and doing in their classrooms.
Our neighbor to the north.
I know. And I was just saying, like, talking about how much Des Moines has kind of grown that I've seen over the years. I've been driving the route through Des Moines for a long time, and it's exploded, which I assume you probably are seeing in the school where you're teaching. And you're from Des Moines Christian School.
Yes.
And how long have you been there?
This is my 7th year at Des Moines Christian. It'll be my 20th year overall in Christian education. And like you're saying, we are just bursting at the seams.
Well, you're a state. You have a tremendous
great
governor.
We do.
Kim Reynolds, not to drag into politics, but the truth of the matter is Kim Reynolds is one of the leaders in universal school choice, and Iowa has just done it. They've done some really revolutionary things in school choice. And have you seen that impact your school, or do you know yet?
Yes, 100%. Even within days of the ESA passing in Iowa, we were just flooded with phone calls. And I always say it's a great problem to have when you have families just clamoring at the door for Christian education. And one of the exciting things for us at Des Moines Christian is looking to that growth. We recently were gifted over 100 acres of land to build a new high school and open up hundreds of seats for Christian education in Des Moines. And just an incredible gift. And we are looking now to steward that well and make Christian education possible for more families.
And that school that you're from, that's a K through 12 school, or just
Actually, it's
high school?
early ed through 12.
Early
so
ed,
we
so
have
pre-pre,
as
like-
young as 2-year-olds all the way through grade 12.
And we were just talking before we started the show here. You have 3 sons, you said, and they're all in the school you teach.
They are, yes. So
That's quite a blessing.
I have, and it's been an incredible gift to me as a teacher. I remember when I was first expecting, thinking, I'll never be able to teach well and do this mom thing.
Right.
And just God's grace through each stage, and now recognizing I'm a better teacher because of them, and that I understand the way boys learn differently than I ever recognized before I had them.
Did you come up in Christian education yourself?
I did, yes.
did.
So actually, I'm probably pretty rare in that from kindergarten all the way through my master's of education was all in Christian schooling.
Really?
And
Where in the world did you get a master's in Christian education?
Dordt University, actually, in Iowa.
Wow.
They offer several master's programs for teacher leaders and administration, and it's all done with the biblical worldview. Just incredible training.
That's amazing.
I don't think I knew such a thing existed, to be perfectly honest with you. I always assumed that when you got a higher degree, generally you had to probably go somewhere where Christian education didn't exist or wasn't a focal point anyway.
Right.
But not the case, is what you're saying.
Nope. So
So you are a
opportunities.
teacher of, I keep thinking Bible, art, like you do it, you kind of do it all. Do you do it separately? Do you mix them
Separately.
together? Okay.
Yes. So primarily I teach 6th grade Bible. I teach Old Testament survey.
Okay.
All of the amazing, fun, fascinating stories of the Old Testament
Wow.
that middle school, for an 11-year-old boy, to get into like the gory, graphic stuff of the Old Testament, they love it. And it's so fun.
So you actually find, that's interesting you say that, because I'll say as an adult, when we really tried to zero in and start studying the Bible, because I to be truthful, I was raised as a Christian, but not steeped in the Bible, I'm sorry to say. So as an adult, I've tried to really study.
Yes.
And the Old Testament can be tough.
It can be.
But you're saying young people actually...
Oh, they love it. The
gravitate
kings
toward
and
it.
the prophets, and just there's so much action in the Old Testament. I find with 6th graders, one of the other great things is that they have learned several stories of the Old Testament, but then there's also this whole other side that they don't know. And in 6th grade, they're old enough now to step into a few more of those stories and chapters, and they're fascinated. Every year we talk about Cain killing Abel, and they know that story. And then we look at the next chapter where Cain goes off to the land of Nod and gets married. And I ask a simple question: where did she come from? And their minds are kind of blown, because they're like, oh, I thought it was Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and really, where did she come from? And then there's that fascinating part for kids that, wow, there's way more to the Bible than I thought.
Yes.
And that really sparks just this curiosity and fun for learning that it just leads us through the rest of the year.
Des Moines Christian has been around how long?
77 years.
Well established.
Yes.
So for you to be recognized amongst your peers and students, that must be quite an honor.
It is. It's humbling, and I'm surrounded by incredible colleagues. I feel like any one of them could be here and really deserve it so much.
Well, one of the things that when we're collecting, when Herzog is collecting nominations and they're, kind of putting out that all call for teachers, it's always people coming back to us with innovative, something different, something new, or they've implemented it well. And yours, I'm just curious on, because the key piece that our information is given is that you put into place something with the spiritual growth conversation tool, that you designed and implemented that. So could you tell people who are listening what that is and what that's about? Because I do think sometimes people get in their heads that Christian education is just kind of the same. It's sort of, it's this repeated, but there's just as much growth and innovation happening in the Christian school front as there is anywhere else.
Absolutely.
So share what that is.
One of the things my colleagues and I have noticed over the last 3 or 4 years is that our students are really struggling with relationships, face-to-face relationships, obvious human relationships. And
is that obviously thanks to screens?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. and just their general their age and their addiction.
Well, it's probably always been awkward anyway at that age. I know it was, but now you add screens.
And in fact, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're talking about an age of kids who are already self-conscious, and now they can escape into a screen and not interact. Is that about right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So one of the things we really were trying to focus on is how do we forge relationships, true relationships, authentic ones, and how do we involve their families? And so this spiritual growth conversation tool really it's an inventory of sorts, or a survey that the students take as a self-assessment. And they look at their own spiritual growth through spiritual disciplines and fruit of the Spirit. But then the interesting part is their parents take the same survey and give their child feedback, and an adult that they choose also takes the survey.
Wow.
So this could be a coach, this could be another teacher, a neighbor, or an aunt or an uncle. And then a teacher also takes the survey. So then this student has a one-on-one conversation with me for about 20 minutes where I just get to pour into them and bless them with the words of adults in their lives who love them, who want to see. And so it really does forge relationships. It also starts conversations. We have a lot of parents who they're heavily invested in their child's faith, but they don't really know how to talk to them about it. And so this survey is just a launching point with questions, basic questions that help start conversations. And then the impact that it had, I think, really surprised me, how our kids, they don't often hear this feedback from adults in their lives, whether it's the busyness of our routine or just that parents are unwilling or unsure of how to do it. And so our kids just were blown away and so encouraged to hear from the adults in their lives, teachers, coaches, neighbors, everyone. And they recognize people are there for me. And these relationships matter. And so as basic as it sounds, innovation right now is relationships.
Is that the key, you believe, to saving the next generation? And I say saving because I literally mean it. I think we're in a time where we're seeing such despair and so much anxiety and depression in kids. I don't know how much of that you're seeing. Our show called Making the Leap, we focus on, leaving that current situation and entertaining either homeschool or Christian education. Do you see a lot of that coming into your school? And how do you pour that into somebody who's almost coming in cold, if you will? Families too. I suppose you experience that a lot with the growth we were just talking about.
Yes. I absolutely think it is an epidemic of the next generation. I say that as a mother and as a teacher. And I think it's something that we have addressed as a problem, but now we have to start providing answers. We have to start equipping our kids to get past it and recognize that there's a place for technology. Technology can be very good in our lives and even in our faith, but only a place. And it will never replace relationships. I take it back to Genesis where, we look at God existing in a Trinity. God exists in community, and He created us in His image. He designed the family unit to be a community, and every bit of us is designed for a relationship. And so the quicker that we can get our kids to recognize that, I think there's a lot of hope for the future, but they need to value relationship over devices.
Amen.
Well, Julie, I just
Great stuff.
I know. I'm kind of blown away every time I listen to somebody. I think, oh my goodness, but we've said it before to others and we're saying it to you too, but truly mean it. It is obvious why you are one of the recipients. I know there are so many deserving people, but we've just really loved the opportunity getting to speak with you guys and hear about all these amazing things that you and others are doing. So thank you for taking your time and sharing that with us today.
We'll
It's a
see you in
pleasure to be
Washington.
here. Thank you.
If we're putting pins on a map, we've never put a pin in this map.
Nope.
From Mississippi, I want you to meet Courtney Warren, one of our Teachers of the Year. Congratulations, Courtney.
Thanks.
What in the world brought you to Missouri as Teacher of the Year, do you suppose? We like to ask why teachers think they got nominated.
Oh my gosh. I feel like at my school, if you walk into the lobby and you hear a loud noise, it's me. It's me. We give tours a lot at our school because we're a wonderful place, and so we tour a lot of students. And almost always they stop by my room, and our amazing admissions director says, "I never know what I'm going to find in your room," because she'll walk in and everybody's like blowing up and popping balloons, or I'm standing on a desk dressed up like Julius Caesar, or I mean always something. And she'll walk in and just be like, "What in the world is happening?" I'm like, "We're just having a good time."
You do middle school, which,
Yes.
I mean, this energy that you exude has to be
has to
there
be.
for a middle
Yes,
schooler, right?
yes.
Like you're uniquely built for middle school, it
Oh,
seems
yeah.
to me. Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Is
Well,
that
we were
the-
talking a little bit about that I think you have to be for middle school education. You can't, there's just no other option.
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
And you teach what subject again?
I am 6th grade Spanish rotation, 7th grade literature, 7th grade creative writing. I also do our literary magazine called The Quill, and I'm our yearbook advisor, which is called The Patriot.
Wow, that's a lot of hats.
Yeah.
How big is your school?
We have about 14 to 1,600 students.
And how long have you been in Christian education?
My whole teaching career.
Oh, really? So is that several years? More than a decade?
I think I've hit a decade this year.
Right at it. You're young then.
Yes, sir.
And we always like to ask Christian school teachers why they think it would be optimal, in their opinion, that students would, and parents and families would take a look at Christian education versus maybe the traditional route.
Oh, my Lanta. I don't even know where to begin with why. I mean, why would you not? I'm a parent, and so it was never an option to have her anywhere else other than a school that would pour Jesus into her, just like she's being poured into at church, just like she's being poured into at home. Her name is Barrett. She's 7 and blonde. But it's actually Hebrew. It means covenant. It's pronounced Barit. And I learned about it when I was studying the Israelites, and they were dedicating their firstborns to God to do great things. And, we named her that because she's going to do great things for God. So when you have a child and you have to raise them up to be a follower of Christ and know that my salvation doesn't guarantee hers, I have to do anything I can to make sure that she makes it to heaven and she lives for Christ. Christian education is just one of those.
It was never a question for you.
Yeah, no, it was never a question.
Yeah.
It was like, that's just a non-negotiable.
And
That's
did you
the
grow
plan.
up as well within Christian education, or was your background different?
I did. I went to private school.
Okay.
I went to an incredible private school. It wasn't a Christian private school, but it was. I mean, it was. We had chapel and things like that. It wasn't the Christian education that my daughter is getting. So,
What's the difference, do you think? I'm really curious on this because we talk about, I know how I would answer it, but I want to hear it from you because I think that's one of the pushbacks from people who aren't sure about private school or private Christian school, and they think they're either one or the same, or there's no difference basically between them. So
And I'll pile on that by saying that we always joke that I think everyone assumes that Christian school means private school means $100,000 tuition and kids wearing blazers and crests on their jacket. So there's that stereotype. So
well, I was a blazer and crest on my jacket, private school student, and I got an incredible education. But I think I only heard about Jesus on Wednesday.
Which is interesting because you just said you had chapel, but so it's probably advertised maybe as Christian school, but it wasn't.
I think it is now. I think
Christian,
they've made a huge shift from when I was there. I mean, leaps and bounds to become a better institution, and they absolutely are. But when it comes to what we do at MRA, you can't walk in the doors and not hear about Jesus. We've got Bible verses on the walls. We've got respect, responsibility, honor. All of our values are backed up with Scripture. And, we have Spiritual Emphasis Week, but it's not just one week. It's something that we're talking about Jesus every single day. We are praying in the morning. We are bringing it into our classrooms and having these conversations. It's just an ever-present part of who we are. And so, they're middle schoolers and they're going to do things that they're not supposed to do. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that one of the biggest things is when you sit and you have a conversation with them, it's not, what do you think you're doing? Yeah. It's like, you and God are cool with that. Come on now. And so and the idea of grace, we make mistakes. Middle schoolers make mistakes, but teachers make mistakes all the time because we're human. And so I think that a big thing that people are concerned with in regard to Christian education is that it's stuffy. I think it's the most forgiving and loving and graceful way to educate a child, because they're seeing us make mistakes and they're seeing us forgive one another and love like Jesus loves us. And that's the whole point. It's not, you made this mistake and you're done. It's, you've made the mistake. Let's help you grow. If there are no mistakes, there are situations. And from those situations comes an opportunity. And so, you're not in the trenches with this horrible decision. You're in a situation. So what can we do to bring you into a different situation? Gideon was in a situation, but he was brought out of his situation to do amazing things. And so that's how we, that's the vibes at MRA.
I think that's really important, because it can't just be a verse on a wall and in isolation. It can't just be prayer in the morning in isolation. Right. So in your classroom, you mentioned earlier, you're somebody doing a tour comes through your room and they don't know what they're going to find. Tell me what they find with regards to biblical education. Tell me what they will see within an English classroom or a Spanish classroom. How do you incorporate that?
Yeah, what does Jesus and Spanish have to do with one another?
And I'd like to know, to tell my own daughter.
Let me talk to you about my Spanish class. They are literally so much fun. They are the highlight of my day. I have those little 6th graders after lunch, and so they are wild. They are so wild, and so am I. Yeah. And so something that we do, which I love in our middle school, is we have our chapel and we have our Bible in the morning. They have Bible class, but at 5th period, the first 10 minutes, rather than have like a normal bell ringer, we have a devotional. And so, no, we're not teaching Spanish, but in that 10 minutes, but we're having devotional time. And so it's a time for me to just develop a relationship with these kids and teach them how to pray, because praying out loud is literally so scary.
100%.
Because your brain just stops.
Yeah.
And so we're the Patriots. And because I am an English teacher, I created the acronym PATS.
Okay.
So pray, ask, thanks, sign off. And so I teach them how to pray. And then, we play all kinds of games. And just how do you treat people? How do you talk to people? Learning a new culture is hard, because learning about anybody that's different from you is hard. And so we tend to pass a lot of judgment on people. That's just part of being a human. And so bringing that idea into how someone speaks to you if English is not their first language. Right? If you're talking to someone and English is not their first language, they're going to speak slower than you do. And you need to slow down. As a fast talker, I know that. You need to slow down. And so talking about giving grace to someone and showing them love in how they speak, they're translating in their head. And so that was my light bulb moment with one of my most recent students, is they were like, I never thought about why it takes someone so long to understand me, or why it takes someone so long to talk to me if they're not from the United States, or if English isn't their first language, but they're translating in their head. I said, isn't that amazing?
Right.
Like, how smart is that person
that you have to do that?
They're shuffling through languages in their head to be able to speak to you. And that led to a conversation of, and that's why we show people grace. Because how would you feel if you were in a different country and you were trying to figure out where to go or what to do or how to say something, and someone was making fun of you because you couldn't figure out what to say, and so it's little moments like that. It's crazy to say, like, we don't stop and talk specifically about, like, this is what happened in the Bible. It's like, how can you show the love of Christ, and how can you push that that scripture into everyday life, because that's what matters. You want to be able to walk into character. You want to be able to walk into the room and, you're in your MRA uniform, but you're wearing a significantly more important uniform, and that's a follower of Christ.
Yeah.
And you want them to be able to recognize him,
Right.
shine his light. And we can do that through those tiny little lessons.
We meet a lot of teachers of the year, and sometimes I have to ask, why are you teacher of the year? I don't even have to ask.
Don't even have to.
It's very clear to me why you're teacher of the year.
Thank you.
Welcome from Mississippi, and congratulations. We'll see you again in D.C.
Thank you
betcha.
so much.
Well, just like we told you, an impressive group of people, but that's not all. We've interviewed 13 of these fantastic folks, and next episode, you're going to meet another batch of our Christian Educators of the Year. See you next week right here.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. We'd love your feedback by rating us and commenting on the show.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Making the Leap.